It's February 19th, 1985, and you're flying across the Pacific to Los Angeles. You're on Taiwan's national carrier, China Airlines. One of the 4 engines flames out. The crew tries to restart the engine, but things go badly wrong. The Boeing 747 SP enters a catastrophic dive. A dive of 9,000 meters. That's 9 kilometers. The airplane is plummeting faster than the speed of sound. A death spiral so fast and violent that the airplane wings are bent, pieces of the plane ripped off. The 251 passengers and 23 crew members aboard are preparing to meet their maker.
The Taiwan History Podcast, Formosa Files, is made possible through the generous sponsorship of the Frank C. Chen Foundation.
Formosa Files.
Today we're looking at a series of China Airlines aviation tragedies. But first, let's take a look at the airline. China Airlines, despite the misleading name, is the national carrier of Taiwan. It was founded by the ROC government in 1959.
Yes, in 1959, with domestic flights and some regional cargo flights. But it was not until 1966 that we see the first official international route. Eric, I don't think you'll be able to guess the destination.
Okay, well, I would say Japan is a likely candidate, Okinawa, Tokyo, maybe Hong Kong.
Saigon, Vietnam.
Saigon, okay, today known as Ho Chi Minh City.
Yeah, this is 1966 and the Vietnam War is really heating up.
And at that time, China Airlines was flying out of Songshan Airport in Taipei City, one of those city airports where you can almost see people inside their apartment buildings, as it's landing.
Almost. Well, you could really see them at Kai Tak Airport in Hong Kong, which was closed in 1998.
So as I said earlier, we'll be looking at a series of China Airlines aviation tragedies. But first, we're kicking off with a near tragedy. The story of China Airlines Flight 006 from 1985.
So this involves a new airport built about 30 kilometers to the west of Taipei, built in 1979 out in Taoyuan.
And today it's called Taoyuan International Airport. And John, I read something funny that when it was open in 1979, people took buses up from Kaohsiung in the south just to visit the airport, just to look at it as a tourist attraction.
Hilarious. You poor deprived Kaohsiung folk. Okay.
Hey.
But at that time, the airport was called Chiang Kai-shek International Airport, CKS Airport. And speaking of old-fashioned ROC branding, China Airline planes had a Republic of China flag design on the tail.
Yeah, had. Today, there's an attractive plum blossom design instead. It's the country's national flower.
Right. So this China Airlines Flight 006 was a daily non-stop flight from CKS International Airport to one of the Western world's worst airports, Los Angeles International Airport.
Yeah, not an impressive airport. Yeah, I agree. But that direct flight is pretty impressive, a change from the old days.
Yep. A trans-Pacific flight used to involve stopovers, usually Tokyo and Honolulu. But in 1985, China Airlines is operating Boeing 747s, those beautiful, iconic giants.
Yeah, I love them too. 747s. Jumbo jets, that distinctive upper deck. It had 2 stories, right?
Right, well done.
Well, I mean, they are one of the most recognizable aircraft of all time.
Yeah, China Airlines Flight 006 is using a 747 SP. SP stands for Special Performance. It's slightly shorter than the standard Boeing 747 and designed for a longer range.
So, February 19th, 1985, the aircraft departs Taiwan at 4:22 in the afternoon. 10 hours later, and the plane is 560 kilometers northwest of San Francisco, cruising at an altitude of 41,000 feet. That's 12,500 meters. The local time in Los Angeles is 7 a.m.
The captain is 55 years old, an experienced pilot, and his name is He Minyuan.
The plane runs into some strong winds, and the captain announces, "Ladies and gentlemen, this is your captain speaking. We're experiencing some light turbulence."
It's getting bumpy and there's a new problem. One of the airplane's 4 engines loses thrust and then stops working. The crew make a request to the flight control center to lower altitude, to get down to where there's more oxygen. It will be easier to reignite the engine. The plane slowly begins to roll to the right, turning and slowing down. It's in danger of stalling. Captain He switches off autopilot and takes manual control of the plane. They fly into thick cloud and the pilot is struggling with the controls. Suddenly, the China Airlines flight stalls and begins falling.
Passengers are being shaken around, some hitting the cabin ceiling, drinks and food and objects flying about. Flight 006 is out of control and speeding toward the ocean. The captain and the crew don't know what's happening. As they struggle to find the problem and fix it, they're dealing with massive G-forces, which makes something simple like, lifting your arm an incredibly hard task.
The 747 finally starts to pull out of its nosedive, but the G-forces change direction and the passengers are pressed to the floor. They're feeling 5 times their normal weight. The plane begins to slow down, but the jet is still dropping.
And then there's another sharp drop. Meanwhile, calls from air traffic control are going unanswered. The stress of the dive is tearing parts of the plane off. The plane finally comes out of the clouds, and the ocean is coming closer and closer. The pilot struggles for control. He has only 30 seconds before his damaged, out-of-control plane hits the ocean. They're going to die, but at least it'll be a quick death.
But the pilot can now orientate himself. He's out of the clouds. He can see the horizon line. He hasn't been trusting the cockpit instruments. He thought they weren't working. So now it's the pilot doing everything. This is basic flying. The human eye, man at the controls, and he pulls the plane out of its dive. But can the machine and the man take these forces? Can the passengers survive the G-forces? As they pull out of this deadly dive, the passengers are getting battered once more. In a way, they're getting crushed by their own weight.
The forces were as many as 5G, and that's a G for gravity. So I think most of us have seen movies, with a pilot doing extreme maneuvers, their faces contorting, blacking out. So let's say you weigh 100 kilograms. 5G forces would be like you weighing 5 times that. You'd weigh 500 kilos.
The plane has plunged 30,000 feet, 9,100 meters. But finally, the pilot manages to stabilize the airplane at 9,500 feet and keep it level.
So they're not going to land at Los Angeles. They're heading for the closest airport, which is San Francisco International Airport. There's been damage to the airplane, including the landing equipment, but the pilot executes a safe landing. Of the 274 people on board, there were 24 injuries, 2 serious, but nobody died.
All those people had faced death and lived.
Whoa, John, what a feeling, huh? I'm sure if it were you, you'd be doing some deep breathing and, I don't know, maybe get yourself a cup of tea, perhaps? In any case, after that, it was time for an investigation. You got to get answers to the questions as in, what the heck just happened, right?
Yeah, the flight crew experiences of the incident as they remembered it didn't match the data recorders. They'd misperceived the situation, made a series of mistakes, fateful decisions which had accumulated and escalated quickly.
Sorry, that's not super clear.
Like the incident itself. Yes, the cause was spatial disorientation. They didn't know where they were. The captain and the first officer, so the co-pilot, they were confused by the position of the airplane. They thought that their instrument readings were wrong, and they were in thick cloud, so they didn't have a natural horizon. Yeah, and their procedure for handling the faulty engine was wrong too.
Okay, so human error from the crew, and the pilot in particular.
The suspicions are that fatigue was partly to blame, crossing time zones. According to their body clocks, this was like 2 a.m, when you're not quite as sharp as usual.
Yeah, 2, 3 a.m. is a really bad time for a lot of people. Okay, so this is an interesting case. A hero pilot who saved the plane from a steep dive and made a difficult landing, but also responsible for putting the people in danger in the first place.
He's a hero pilot in my book.
Yeah, I'm with you on that. Okay, so now we move forward to 1994 and the very sad tale of China Airlines Flight 140. 8 o'clock on a Tuesday evening, China Airlines Flight 140 is approaching Japan's Nagoya Airport. Nagoya is a city between Tokyo and Osaka, home to Toyota, the motor company, and it's just under 3 hours flying time from Taipei. There are 256 passengers aboard, mostly Japanese tourists returning from package tours of Taiwan.
And the plane is the popular Airbus A300, and it's in good condition, just a few years old. Often with crashes, the age of a plane might come into question. An old plane with worn-out parts. But the newness of the plane is going to be part of the problem here. The A300 was a big step towards fully automated aircraft. The plane itself is doing a lot more of the flying, the pilot and co-pilot doing less.
Flight 140 is getting ready to land. At the controls is 26-year-old first officer. He's flying the plane under the guidance of Captain Wang Leqi, who has more than 20 years' experience.
A young guy paired with an old hand, some on-the-job training, so to speak.
As the plane approaches the airport, light turbulence shakes the cabin. The air traffic controller tells Flight 140 to slow down because it's getting too close to a larger plane ahead. They're landing tonight without autopilot.
Right. If you use autopilot all the time, your skills get rusty. So it's good to do things the old-fashioned way sometimes.
They're a few minutes away from the runway when there's a burst of speed, but the plane should be slowing down. The first officer tries to lower the nose to push the plane down, but it's unresponsive.
The captain takes over, but he also struggles to control the plane. It stalls and crashes into the ground next to the runway, killing 264 of the 271 persons on board. About 60% of the passengers were Japanese, and many of the others were Taiwanese.
This event remains the deadliest accident in the history of China Airlines. 264 people dead, 7 survivors, and the survivors were all passengers that were seated in rows 7 through 15.
The investigation begins, and as usual, the cockpit voice recorder and the flight data recorder were key. The investigators find that the first officer and the captain who took over, right, were basically fighting the airplane. They were trying to go down, but the plane had other ideas. It was like it was possessed. It wanted to go up.
That possession, it really can only be one thing, right? It's the autopilot. But they had turned it off. This was supposed to be a manual approach and landing.
Yes, but the first officer's hand had accidentally touched a small switch on the front of the thrust levers. Those levers are the control columns which pilots move forward or backward to adjust the amount of thrust produced by the engines. This small switch he touched was the go-around switch.
Okay, the co-pilot has accidentally touched a small switch, and now the go-around mode is activated. Go-around, as the name suggests, is when the plane needs to go around the airport.
Right. When a landing is aborted and the pilot pulls up out of the descent and makes a circle, comes back for another landing. This decision to go around could be made for various reasons. Perhaps the weather conditions are bad, or there's something on the runway, traffic congestion. The go-around tells the autopilot to give more power and to lift the plane up.
But the pilots on the China Airlines flight don't realize that the plane is trying to go around. They're still trying to land, and the plane is caught between 2 opposing commands. The first officer is trying to push the nose down, but the flight computer wants the nose to go up. The flight voice recorder has the co-pilot or the first officer saying, "Sir, I still can't push it down." And the captain takes control just 40 seconds before impact, and he's heard saying, "What's wrong with this?" He just can't figure it out. He can't do anything.
Neither of the pilots noticed the plane was in go-around mode. And I can understand. The cockpit instruments are a confusing wall of dials and numbers. And the on sign, it's just a few small words on a screen, hard to see. And before they understand what's happening, the plane suddenly, thrusts up, stalls, and then it drops.
So when a car stalls, it loses engine power. And pretty much the same with a plane, yeah?
To some extent, but also the plane loses lift on the wings because the angle is too steep.
Right, okay, so back to the investigation. With pilot error seen as the cause of the accident, the training and expertise of the two pilots come under the microscope. The 26-year-old first officer had joined China Airlines as a student. He trained on small aircraft and became first officer a year before the crash. So, yeah, he doesn't have many hours under his belt.
The 42-year-old Captain Wang has been flying for more than 20 years, but not that much of it in the Airbus. He flew military aircraft and then Boeing 747s. He was only promoted to captain a year before when he started flying the Airbus 300.
A year, so kind of the same as his young co-pilot.
Yep. Looking into the training records, the air crash investigators learned that China Airlines did not have an A300 flight simulator. So the captain had been sent to a simulator in Bangkok, Thailand. But there's an important difference. This simulator he trained on had a different setup from the plane. If you push on the lever, the autopilot the go around is overridden.
So the exact opposite of what the crash plane did.
Hmm.
So even if the pilot knew or thought the go-around button was on, based on the different setup of his flight simulator experience, he would think pushing the control lever all the way forward would force the autopilot to hand complete control back to the pilot.
Right.
So this accident is going to be written down as due to pilot error and obviously problems with pilot training.
Yes, but I think Airbus has some of the blame too.
Airbus, for anyone who doesn't know, that's the European Aerospace Corporation, a conglomerate of various European companies headquartered in France.
Right. There was a problem with how easily the go-around switch could go on, the poor screen sign showing it's on, and how hard it was to turn off. There were multiple steps. It's not just an off button.
And there had been previous cases of crews struggling to override the A300's automation. They had come close to crashing, but hadn't.
Less than a year back, Airbus had actually issued a notification to airlines recommending that they modify the computer setup so that automatic control would turn off if the pilot pushed hard on the lever or yoke. This hadn't happened with any of the China Airlines A300s.
Okay, you said they recommended. That's not a mandatory demand or, like a recall or something like that. It's a recommendation.
Right, not a mandatory change. It was left to the airlines to do it if they wished and when. China Airlines decided to wait until the airplanes were out of service for another reason, getting repaired for something else, and fix the computers then.
What a pity. This is a tragedy that could have been prevented. But this problem of men and machines interacting, well, lightning would strike again 4 years later with another China Airlines Airbus A300. This was Flight 676, flying from Bali, Indonesia to Chiang Kai-shek International Airport. On February 16th, 1998, it crashed into a road and residential neighborhood in Taoyuan, Taiwan, killing 182 passengers, 14 crew, and 7 people on the ground. In my circle of friends at that time, we had a guy who was in Bali vacationing, and he missed that flight.
Ooh, that's lucky.
Fortunately.
The captain of this China Airlines flight was Kang Long-lin, an Air Force veteran. He's got over 2,000 hours on the Airbus A300. The co-pilot has relatively little experience.
As an extra sad side note, the captain's wife and 2 children are on board returning from a holiday in Bali.
Oh.
Almost all of the other passengers are Taiwanese returning home.
They're just moments from landing, and the weather is getting worse. There's a thunderstorm. The captain pitches the nose down for the descent, but the captain doesn't like the approach, and he's going to do a go-around.
So he aborts the landing attempt, and moments later, we have the plane falling out of the sky, crashing and exploding in flames. 196 dead. This is the worst air disaster in Taiwan and came just 4 years after the China Airlines tragedy in Nagoya, Japan. So the public is asking very reasonably, Is it safe to fly on China Airlines? The government in Taiwan grounds China Airlines' entire fleet of A300s until all the planes can be checked, and they still don't know what caused the crash.
There's a lot of pressure on the flight investigators while these planes, are grounded. They check the debris, the flight recorders, the conversations of the two pilots, and there's the flight data recorder with all the airplane details.
The air crash investigation determines that the pilot had unintentionally released the plane's autopilot by making a steep downward movement, which disengaged the go-around function, the autopilot. So he did nothing to take control of the plane for 11 seconds.
No one's flying the plane for 11 seconds. That's a long time in a dangerous situation.
Yeah, but he thought the autopilot was flying the plane, but it wasn't.
Yeah, he then executed a sudden steep ascent, which produced a stall and crash. And there was bad communication between the pilots, and a lack of training also was blamed.
China Airlines' next disaster would be something quite different. No pilot error, no problem with automation. This was China Airlines Flight 611 to Hong Kong. On May 25th, 2002, China Airlines Flight 611 disintegrated in mid-air and crashed into the Taiwan Strait. This happened 20 minutes after taking off from Taipei's Chiang Kai-shek International Airport, and it happened so quickly there was no distress signal sent out. They crashed about 43 kilometers northeast of Magong, Penghu, killing all 225 people on board.
Of those 225, the remains of 175 were recovered and identified. About half of those bodies were found floating on the ocean surface of the Taiwan Strait, and they were recovered by fishing boats and military vessels.
The great majority of passengers were Taiwanese. They were with tour groups traveling to China. So in 2002, there were still no direct air links between Taiwan and China. That didn't happen until more like 2008. So people typically flying to China would fly through Hong Kong.
One of those Taiwanese tourists was the grandfather of a student I taught.
Oh, sad. So there were 190 passengers from Taiwan, also 9 from China, and the governments of Taiwan and the People's Republic of China cooperated in the recovery of the aircraft. Taiwanese search teams were allowed to enter areas controlled by the People's Republic of China.
The investigation concluded that a faulty repair to the lower rear skin of the aircraft following a tail strike, that's when the tail scrapes along the runway. Actually, this happened at Kai Tak Airport in Hong Kong 22 years earlier. The repair had been done incorrectly, and the whole tail section had weakened and then failed. And this was a Boeing 747.
A jumbo jet, like the one in our first story, which survived the crazy 9-kilometer plunge back in 1985.
Yes, this was the last passenger 747 aircraft left in China Airlines fleet at the time, and its oldest aircraft had been in service since 1979.
And they were phasing out the Boeing 747s.
Yes, and here's a sad fact to the story. This was the plane's last trip for China Airlines. They just sold the plane. After the plane came back to Taiwan from Hong Kong, it was going to be delivered to Bangkok to a now defunct airline in Thailand. This Thai airline went bankrupt in part because of a deadly crash.
Wow. Okay, so China Airlines experienced 3 tragedies, 1994, 1998, 2002, 3 deadly incidents in 8 years. 264 dead in Nagoya, 196 at Taoyuan Airport, and 225 over the Taiwan Strait. That would have killed many other airlines, especially seeing as the aviation market around that time had opened up.
Right, lots of international carriers, and there was now some local competition too. EVA Airlines, founded in 1989 as an affiliate of shipping giant Evergreen. EVA was Taiwan's first real private international airline.
But China Airlines had government backing and got through the troubles. And since then, it has improved its reputation and has an excellent safety record. It gets good ratings by both passengers and aviation agencies. So they've really just turned things around. But they still have that legacy name, China Airlines. And John, I'm thinking we probably won't be seeing a change to a Taiwan Airlines anytime soon.
Unlikely, but they do already kind of have a Taiwan in the name.
Where? I've looked at some micro font on the underside of the plane or something.
Well, you know that newish low-cost airline based here, Tiger Air Taiwan?
Yeah.
Well, it's owned by China Airlines. The next time you're at an airport, have a look for a Tiger Air Taiwan plane, and you'll see Taiwan written on the side of the plane. Not right next to Tiger Air and not as prominent, but big enough.
Okay, cool. And am I right in guessing that this airline does not fly to China?
Correct. Lots of cool destinations, though, especially in Japan. I took them to Okayama earlier in the year.
All right. Well, I'll look for that the next time I'm at an airport. All right. Well, we've run out of time, and most of our stories today haven't been all that happy. So we thought we'd end on something positive. We recently got an email from a woman in Norway who, when she was a kid, lived in Taiwan back in the 80s, and she actually learned English as a second language here in Taiwan, Morrison School, and a bit of Chinese. And she wrote a song about Taiwan, sort of like a love song to Taiwan. Her name is Kristen Levkin Haffel. I hope I'm saying that right. And I'm going to end this episode with a shorter social media edit of her song, Beautiful Island. Enjoy.
Beautiful island, you'll always be a part of me. Beautiful island, beautiful island, la Formosa. Beautiful island, waves in the sand, your peaceful breeze puts me at ease. A peaceful breeze, beautiful island, string in my hand.
You can listen to the whole song on Kristen's YouTube page. Look for a link in the description, and there's also a link on our website. Thanks for listening to Formosa Files. I'm Eric Michael Smith.
I'm John Ross.